Welcome to Moving Proposals from Good to Great, Insights from 3 APMP Fellows. I'm Beth Wingate, President of Lofeld Consulting Group, former CEO of APMP International, and former APMP National Capital Area Chapter President. I'm an APMP Fellow, and I've been with Lofeld Consulting Group for over 16 years. I've managed proposals for small, mid-size, and large government contractors for over 35 years, including training teams in proposal best practices, writing sections of the APMP body of knowledge, and co-writing 7 books on capture and proposal best practices. I'd like to introduce my colleagues, Brenda Christ and Bob Lofeld. Brenda, over to you.
Hey, I'm Brenda Christ. I'm Vice President of Lofeld Consulting Group. I've been in the field for 25 plus years, and I am an APMP Fellow, certified at the professional level, a certification instructor, and also former Chair of the Year. So over to you, Bob.
Thanks, Brenda. I'm Bob Lofeld, CEO and founder of Lofeld Consulting Group. I've been in this role since 2003. And have the privilege of working with lots of companies, helping them with their proposals and capture activities. Prior to serving at Lofeld Consulting, I was a division president at Lockheed Martin, running their division that built cloud computing and hybrid cloud solutions for commercial and government clients.
We're going to start off with some questions for all of you in the audience. Raise your hand if you think you know what a proposal strength is. Do you often put too much effort into proposal sections that aren't going to be scored? Do you regularly have a high scoring solution before the RFP drops? Do you review your proposals like an evaluator would? And does your company maintain a standard of excellence for your proposals? Based on surveys we've done previously, I suspect that many of you didn't keep your hands raised, and that's okay. We're going to talk today about what makes a great proposal and give you some tips for moving your proposals from good to great.
We define a great proposal as one that is high scoring, and to achieve a high scoring result, you have to have a proposal that is rich in features that can be scored as evaluation strengths. And this is especially important in government bids, where the government evaluators go through your proposal looking for these features. So a strength in the definition of the government is a feature where you offer to exceed a contract requirement in a way that's beneficial to a customer. So let's go to the next chart and I'll show you a typical evaluation criteria set up in a government solicitation. If you read from the left column are the color ratings, and the government has a choice. They can give you a color rating or they can give you an adjectival rating. The colors are typically blue being the best, purple then green being acceptable, and yellow and red mean pretty much that you're never going to win. Or they can give you an adjectival rating, outstanding, good, acceptable, marginal, or unacceptable. They'll also provide in an RFP a definition, and let's look closely at this definition for a blue or outstanding score. It says it's a proposal that indicates an exceptional approach and understanding of requirements and contains multiple strengths. So if we're going to have a high scoring proposal, a prerequisite is that we need to have multiple strengths, and these multiple strengths need to be tied back to the evaluation criteria. So we'll go through and show you some tips on how you can move your proposal from good to great. Let me pass it off to Brenda.
Thanks, Bob. Tip number 1, use a strength-based solution approach. So to build one, you must create approaches with the highest number of strengths across all evaluated criteria. To do that, number 1, develop a mutual understanding of the scope of all the requirements. 2, create your basic solution, which consists of a high-level concept of operations or a diagram that depicts your solution like at 5,000 feet. Number 3, identify your features to be scored as strengths for each evaluated criteria, and we'll talk more about that on the next slide. Number 4, make a list of information for gaps and determine how to fill them. And finally, number 5, repeat this process. Developing a good solution takes a lot of iteration. Let's talk more about identifying the features to be scored as strength in this example. First, let's talk about reducing the ability of predators to penetrate a network by 10%. So here are the features that our firm is going to offer: an AI-based research engine to predict and detect predators. Number two, an analytics dashboard to view predators so we can see how they're moving and how they're entering so we can take appropriate action. Third, an alerting system that will identify these potential threats so our technicians can take appropriate action. And number four, a dashboard that allows us to view all of these threats in real time. Now, all of these features are going to provide a lot of benefits to our customer, including a more accurate depiction of the behavior of these predators, an analytics dashboard that will allow us to drill down in successive layers of detail to show exactly what's going on, a customizable alerting system, and a dashboard that spans all types of hybrid platforms. Next, we have to provide evidence for our benefits. And in this instance, customers across DoD have received 40% fewer cyber breaches for 5 relevant DoD projects. So what we're going to do is for each of the requirements, we're going to carry out this same principle: the requirement, the feature, the benefit, and evidence. And hopefully we'll have multiple strengths across all evaluated criteria.
Tip number 2 is build your proposal to be scored, not read. Can you just imagine what it's like to be an evaluator, a government evaluator, looking at 10 different proposals and having to go through each one and score them? It is a difficult undertaking for sure. And we find that evaluators tend to skim through proposals first rather than reading them closely. So given that understanding of what goes on behind the curtain, let's begin by building out for ourselves an evaluation scorecard, just as the evaluators will do. And then when we design our proposal, we want to feature strengths in that proposal that can be tied back to these evaluation criteria. And we want the strengths, these statements, to be easily discoverable in the proposal by the team of evaluators. So we have a feature benefit proof construct to simplify the presentation of a strength, but it becomes really important to say in this strength we're going to exceed a government requirement and state that in the strength statement, because so often the evaluators don't actually know what the requirements are. So we have a better construct to say a strength should be presented with a statement of the customer objective, the feature of our offer that we're providing to exceed the customer objective, state explicitly the benefit that the government will receive, and then provide some proof point or evidence that it's achievable. Think about this in a way that you want to present these features in your proposal so they pop off the page, and we'll talk about that later. And we'll talk about a sleepy evaluator test that we run on proposals to say that you have 10 seconds per page to find the features that you score as strengths. So that all folds into your design. Let's take a look at an example of what a strength statement might look like. Now, this is a hypothetical statement. It's certainly one that you wouldn't use in a proposal, but it presents a good example. So here, the customer objective, we've stated that in blue so you can see it. It's the Department of Defense decreases the risk of transition disruption, which is what they want to do. That's their objective. With our feature, our proven incumbent capture plan, and the benefit of that, we say, reduces the 60-day transition time by 50%, and we can capture 100% of qualified incumbents. That's a substantial benefit. And the proof of it is, in the last 12 transitions, we've achieved this result. So there's that structure that you look for: customer objective, feature benefit, some quantitative proof, and evidence that, in this case, that you're reducing risk to the government, which is always good to see. So tip 3, we'd like you to draft your briefing to the evaluators. And when we do this in the proposal, we set up a criteria for our proposal that says we want to have multiple strengths subordinate to each evaluation factor. And it's pretty easy to see that if you had 5 evaluation factors and maybe each one had 2 sub-factors, So now you have maybe 10 places where you need to have strengths, and you need multiple strengths in each of those to get an outstanding score. So pretty soon you need 20 strengths. And maybe if the government is not going to observe every strength you bid, you should design your proposal to have a target of 30 strengths across all those evaluation factors. When we do the design, we also build a briefing to the source selection official. And I like to brief this to the company executives as we're building the proposal to say if everything we want is delivered and they evaluate it correctly, this is the briefing that the source selection official will receive. And the briefing is structured by evaluation criteria and by factor and a sub-factor. And then each of the strengths that are observed are placed in that briefing. When we brief that to our executive team, we'll often come back and say, oh, here's some more strengths you can add, or you should change these. We believe that when we build this, we can create a strengths register for companies because the strengths are often reusable from one proposal to the next. When we receive our debrief, ultimately from the government, we want to do an analysis of our strength submission, and we create a metric called strengths observed versus strengths bid. The metric is done and collected for each proposal that we do, and where we find that the strengths we bid weren't observed, we go back and do a root cause analysis and lessons learned so that next time around we can do it better.
Tip number 4 is build your proposal in layers. Think of building your proposal in terms of layers, or art and creating a painting, or as a sport and a coach planning their next match. As an artist versus a coach, I think about painting in terms of a foundation layer, roughing out my design to be sure I have everything where I want it to be. It's easier to mock everything up and get it all organized before adding colors and additional details. From my binging Ted Lasso, coaches start planning their next match by determining where they want to position their defense. When we look at proposals, we do them in much the same way. We have a foundational layer, our defense, which is a compliant structure based on RFP instructions with responsive content. We get our proposal roughed out, and we have a basic proposal with no weaknesses, but also no strengths. A C paper, definitely not a winner. Then we add our middle layer where we bring in color and texture, and the picture starts to come to life and engages the viewer. In sports, we add our offense and determine how they'll get the ball down the field. In our proposal middle layer, we take all our features that we believe will be scored as strengths and add their corresponding benefits and proofs and ensure they're in the right sections of the proposal to be scored. When we focus on the benefits to the customer and their mission, our proposal becomes all about the customer and less about how world-class, best of breed, and cutting edge we are and how proud we are to submit. In art, we have a final finishing layer, whether it's varnishing and oil painting or considering the frame we'll use to highlight the contents or the lighting we might use to accent it. In sports, we run practices, testing and refining our game plans and communications so that on game day, we have our best chance of winning. Similarly, we have a final layer in proposals where we go through our proposal and ensure that it's easy to evaluate, communicates visually, is well written, and is full of strengths, an A+ paper. Tip number 5, put your proposal effort where it really matters. Just like Sisyphus condemned to push a huge boulder up a hill for all eternity, only to watch it roll back down each time he almost reached the top, wasting all of his efforts. Stop wasting your limited resources and apply them where they really matter. Not all parts of the proposal will be read or scored equally, so focus most on the pieces that will be scored. Many of you are familiar with our research report where we talked with proposal evaluators about win themes, the things we all used to obsess over, and not one evaluator knew what a win theme was. They told us their job was to go through our proposals looking for strengths. A theme doesn't show up in the FAR or in our evaluation guidance. So, start telling yourself and your proposal teams that when someone says win theme, think scoring strengths. In terms of executive summaries, unless they're scored, and they're typically not, don't make them a labor of love and spend all your time on them. They're okay to include because they can act like a scoring guide to say, if you read our proposal, here are all the great features you're going to discover that should be evaluated as strengths. Most proposal text will be scored as either satisfactory or deficient. It did the job, nothing noteworthy. So if it's only ever going to be scored as satisfactory, don't spend extra cycles trying to improve it once you achieve satisfactory. If you want to increase your proposal scores, put your effort where it really matters, engineering features into your solution that can be scored as strengths and conveying them effectively in your proposals.
Tip number 6, review your proposals like your customer. One of the biggest dichotomies that we see in proposal reviews is that industry does not review proposals like evaluators. Firms release proposals for review with an RFP, a compliance matrix, and a request that company executives and SMEs review it and provide comments for improvements. That's not how our customers evaluate proposals. Our customers score a proposal, and the winner receives a contract. So let's revisit how we review proposals by first building a compliance matrix, of course, then building a scorecard using the RFP evaluation criteria, reviewing the proposal for compliance, and scoring the proposal using the score sheet. Then outbriefing the scores to the writing team and making recommendations for improvement. Here is an example of a scorecard for a management approach. The proposal manager ordered the scorecard using the evaluation criteria contained in section M.2.1 through M.2.4, and then added associated references in other RFP sections to facilitate the evaluator's review. For each evaluated criteria, the reviewer can score the number of strengths, weaknesses, significant weaknesses, deficiencies, and risks in the table. Then the reviewer can describe the specific strengths and weaknesses in the notes section. This scorecard indicates that the reviewer did not find any strengths in the project and transition plans. So the proposal team must determine why the strengths were not easily identified or present and create plans to increase their score.
This next tip is an easy one, and it's important because we want to make our proposals easy to evaluate by the government evaluators. I'm a stickler about the proposal headings. And what we've found is that in each section of the proposal, if we will reference in the header the proposal instruction and the evaluation criteria and perhaps the statement of work, then it becomes easier for the evaluators to go through your proposal and pick out the sections that they need to review and score. They can often do it electronically if your headers are set up correctly. So let me show you an example of that on the next slide. Here's a header for a typical section in a proposal. The first one is understanding, and probably the proposal instruction L1 said describe your understanding, and M1 probably said something similar. And it's asking you to do that for each section in the statement of work, which would be section C. So if I were an evaluator and my task were to score the evaluation criteria M1, I would take your proposal and I'd write a search in the PDF and look for M1 throughout the proposal. And if the headers are set up correctly, every section of the proposal that will respond to M1 will pop up in my search. So I can expeditiously go through the proposal and evaluate it and score it. So you can see here other examples of it, but every section header has a reference back to instructions and evaluation criteria or other elements of the proposal that need to be reviewed. So it's an easy tip to do. Make it a good practice for your team to always do this. When we move forward with artificial intelligence, you can bet for sure that AI tools will be looking for these headers. So let's be prepared and put the practice in place now.
Tip number 8, communicate your message visually. As an artist, I love the idea of visual communications. We use that term versus graphics because what we're doing is taking our strengths and trying to communicate them visually to the reviewers. We begin by listing the strengths we want to communicate and then figuring out how to communicate them visually. We don't begin by selecting a graphic and trying to force our features into it. We design our proposals using a number of visual techniques to highlight our features, benefits, and proofs so evaluators can easily identify our strengths. We conducted numerous review exercises and learned that typically 1/3 of evaluators are text readers and skip over every graphic and table. Another third can tell you everything they saw in the figures and tables, but they tend to focus on data and skip the words. It's the old left brain versus right brain. The final third are, hopefully, hybrids and look at everything. Additionally, remember that evaluators faced with piles of proposals and hundreds of pages to review get tired and start skimming for the information to complete their score sheets. So we have to communicate across two frequencies, text and visual, to be sure we convey our strengths. We use our sleepy evaluator test that Bob mentioned previously to ensure our proposals communicate visually. Take your proposal and give reviewers 10 seconds per page to evaluate it. Flip through the pages quickly. You can't read a page in 10 seconds. You have to evaluate it visually. Look at the graphics, tables, pull quotes, colors, etc., and use that information to score the proposal. There are many ways to highlight our strengths and make them pop off the page. Cherry boxes, or Harvey balls as we used to call them, at the beginning of sections. Tables that clearly organize, chunk, and present information. Text boxes and shading, bolding, and highlighting. Graphics and action captions that tell the reviewers exactly what you want them to take away. Icons that repeat consistently throughout your proposal to guide evaluators, build trust, and help them find information and strengths easily.
Number 9 now, establish a standard of excellence. Here is Lofeld's standards of excellence. You can see we have 7 steps to move proposals from good to great. The first is compliant structure. All your proposals must have a 100% compliance with all of the proposal's instructions. Number 2 is responsive content. Number 3, they must be customer focused. Number 4, they must be compelling and rich in features and benefits that lead to strengths. Next, they must be easy to evaluate, visually appealing, and finally, well written. While we don't have time to review all of the 7 quality criteria, let's focus on one, well written. That can be a vague term, so let me define it further. At the most basic level, a well-written proposal does not contain grammar or spelling errors, including passive voice, noun stacks, split infinitives, and nominalizations. In addition, the proposal does not contain words that are overly formal, colloquial, or that the writer cannot substantiate. Refer to our blog, 100 Words That Kill Your Proposal, if you want to eliminate those fluffy words from your proposal. However, well-written proposals describe your understanding of the size, scope, and complexity of the RFP requirements. They clearly and concisely describe how you will do the work and mitigate operations risk. The message is contained in one voice and is easily understood by laymen. Well-written proposals also contain white space, bolding, italics, boxes, and tables to convey information that brings attention to the content.
The last lesson is about lessons learned, and often we say it's lessons relearned because many times we encounter the same problems in proposals, and yet we seem not to find clients correcting the issues. So we want to raise the importance of their lessons learned exercise. I like to do 2 lesson learned exercises on each bid. The first is after the proposal is delivered. Take a few days, let everybody recover from the proposal activity, and then gather the team together electronically with a quick survey. The second is after the award, and we have a debrief from the government. So both opportunities for lessons learned provide different results. For the first one, the post-delivery review, I like to involve all participants in the pursuit. So I reach back to the business development team, the capture team, the proposal team, the team that handled questions and answers, and the team that did the final proposal revisions. And we like to ask some simple questions. The fundamental question is, what did we do well? And you can probe that with lots of subordinate questions, but I tend to make it pretty simple on the survey. What did we do well? What could have gone better? And the third question is, what recommendations would you like to make? I tell the team, all the participants, to send the comments to me, and I anonymize them because people will write things that they shouldn't say politically or things that you just don't want to have everybody discussing. So we clean it up and make a nice lessons learned briefing out of it, and then gather all the participants back together, brief it, and let them discuss the results. If there are things that they see they should be able to improve and want to improve, we tell them, modify your procedures for proposal development right there. Don't wait until the end of the year and do a bunch of proposals and making the same mistake. Let's change the process and let's brief everybody on the plan going forward. An important thing that I see rarely ever done is when a company is going to go back and bid another procurement to the same organization, same government organization, we ask that they review all the lessons learned from prior submissions to that same customer. And if you've archived these briefings, then you'll have them in your knowledge repository. You can pull them back and brief the capture team so that they don't make the same mistakes that were made on the last one. So make lessons learned an important part of your process and learn from every bid that you do.
Thanks so much for sharing your insights with everybody, Bob and Brenda. To get more tips for moving your proposals from good to great, visit our website where you'll find our white papers, articles, blog posts, books, and information about our capture, proposal, and generative AI services, as well as our related training classes. Please contact us if you'd like to explore how we can assist you and your team